Remember Wish.com? In the late 2010s, Wish.com was the go-to place to buy cheap online goods, almost like an online dollar store. They sold everything from drones and SD cards to bedsheets and candy, all for unbelievably low prices. But moving into the 2020s, Wish has largely fallen out of the spotlight. Google Trends, for example, suggests that interest in Wish.com is down a painful 96%. And that's actually one of their more favorable metrics. If we take a look at stock performance, we'll see that Wish is down over 99% from their IPO. And that isn't just the market being harsh on Wish either. Their fundamentals are very much in line with a 99% stock decline. Revenue, for instance, has fallen from nearly $3 billion per year to less than $300 million per year. And their net margin is, wait for it, worse than negative 100%. In other words, for every dollar they pull in, they spend over $2. As such, I don't think you'd be surprised to hear that they haven't even had a single profitable quarter since going public. And as they burn through their cash reserves at record speed, we're looking at a bankruptcy probability of 78%. Context Logic, Wish's parent company, is very much aware of this situation, and that's why they recently agreed to sell off the entirety of Wish to an Asian retailer for a rock-bottom price of $173 million. For perspective, it's rumored that Jeff Bezos offered $10 billion to buy the company back in 2016. So it's safe to say that Wish is all but dead. But what happened? With all the high inflation, pandemic, and economic uncertainty, you would think that the demand for cheap online goods is at an all-time high. And it is. The demand just hasn't gone to Wish. Instead, that demand has flown into a new online dollar store called Temu. Temu wasn't even launched till September of 2022, but it was the most popular iOS app of 2023 and one of the most popular Google Play Store apps as well. So clearly, it's not the cheap goods market that has fallen, but just the market for Wish. So here's the rise and fall of Wish and why the company was not able to stand the test of time. Taking a look back, Wish isn't a new company like Temu. They were actually founded way back in 2010 by two men named Peter Zolszewski and Danny Zhang. Peter had a rather tough childhood. He was born in communist-stricken Warsaw, Poland back in 1981. His parents did, however, leave as soon as communism fell in 1989 and immigrated to Ontario, Canada. And from there, Peter more or less experienced the classic tech entrepreneur journey. He would study mathematics and computer science at the University of Waterloo before moving to Palo Alto, California and becoming an engineer at Google. There, his job was to write algorithms that could better match people's searches with relevant ads. This would become the groundwork for what would eventually become Wish.com. After working at Google for 5 years and getting rich off of Google stock, in 2009, Peter decided to quit his job, take 6 months off, and create his own company. What did this company do, you ask? Well, exactly what Peter was working on at Google. The company specialized in analyzing and matching browsing and search behavior with relevant products and ads. And fittingly, Peter would name the company Context Logic. Getting such a company off the ground would normally be extraordinarily difficult because you're essentially competing head-on with Google. But Peter had the classic Silicon Valley ace up his sleeve, VC funding. Peter would go on to raise $1.7 million from Yelp CEO Jeremy Stoppelman, Yahoo founder Jerry Yang, and his own angel fund. Peter would also recruit one of his college friends, Danny Zhang, as a co-founder. But despite having a bunch of funding and a great product, it was still unsurprisingly nearly impossible to take on Google. So the team would start working on pivoting the business, and one of the main ideas that kept popping up in their discussions was mobile e-commerce. But this seemed like a surefire way to just end up getting destroyed by another tech giant, Amazon. All of this would change in 2011 though. You see, Facebook had heard about Context Logic's recommendation engine, and they wanted to buy it out for $20 million and integrate it into their own ad system. Any logical person would have taken this blessing of an offer in a heartbeat, but this simply convinced Peter to do the exact opposite. Facebook's interest in Context Logic had made Peter more confident than ever that he could take on the e-commerce industry. Peter's investors were naturally extremely upset that he turned down Facebook's offer, but little did they know that Context Logic was about to make one of the biggest turnarounds in Silicon Valley history. In late 2011, Peter and Danny would relaunch Context Logic as Wishwall.me. Initially, you couldn't buy or sell anything on Wishwall. It was just a simple wishlist website with a curated collection of products. The idea was that you could wish for products on the website and you may be rewarded with exclusive discounts and free items. At the start, Wishwall had no way of actually getting these products for a discount, but they decided that they could just figure it out when they needed to. Their first and foremost focus was to just get people to create wish lists on Wishwall, and this was surprisingly easy. It turns out that a lot of people like to mindlessly scroll such websites. As Peter admitted, some people are just into that. Within no time, Wishwall would amass tens of thousands of users, and it was now time to actually source the deals. The strategy here was pretty simple. Peter cold emailed a bunch of manufacturers and told them that they could drive thousands of people to their product if they knocked down the price by 10 to 20% exclusively for Wishwall. This was a surprisingly effective strategy, but it was also Wish's first mistake. To offer customers as lucrative of a deal as possible, Wishwall would pass off the entire savings to the end user. AKA, Wishwall had no means of earning revenue. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. The normal Silicon Valley playbook is to get customers first and worry about monetization later. But here's the problem. Wishwall wasn't really getting long-term customers that they could monetize later down the road. Wishwall's customers were only loyal to the deal, not Wishwall itself, so it was in Wishwall's best interest to monetize these users while they still had the chance. But Wishwall decided to play the long game, which eventually backfired. That was a long time out though, and in the meantime, things were going great. They would raise tens of millions more in funding and they would merge their two businesses, the ads business and the e-commerce business, and this is what really blew up Wish. Having worked on ads recommendation engines for nearly a decade at this point, Peter had an industry-leading grasp of how to serve ads that worked, and that's exactly what Wishwall would do. They would spend millions and eventually billions on highly effective ad campaigns, luring people in with deals that seemed too good to be true. If you've ever wondered who Google and Facebook's biggest customers are, it's people like Wish. At one point, Wish was the biggest ad buyer on Facebook and one of the biggest on Google at the same time. Even the Lakers were sponsored by Wish. That year, they spent over $1 billion on sales and marketing. And naturally, this sort of marketing effort not only attracted the eyes of consumers, but also the eyes of some pretty big players, specifically Jeff Bezos. In 2016, Jeff invited Peter to Amazon's HQ to have an acquisition talk. Peter signed an NDA, so we don't know the exact details of the meeting, but it's rumored that Amazon offered $10 billion to buy out Wish. Peter would of course turn down the deal, but it wasn't long after that he would start regretting that decision. The first major obstacle that Wish ran into was simply the raw size of their undertaking. Traditional retailers usually spend decades building up relationships with manufacturers and suppliers to ensure that everything scales smoothly. Amazon didn't do this, but what Amazon did do was control the vast majority of the logistics channel. So they could personally ensure that people received their purchases and that the products weren't visibly damaged. Not to mention, Amazon has industry-leading customer service that even the haters can't help but admit. Wish, on the other hand, had none of this. They didn't have deep, multi-decade-long relationships, they didn't control the logistics channel, they had no way of verifying product quality, and their customer support was underwhelming to say the least. As such, when they scaled to over 1 million registered merchants within just a few years, their platform became plagued with not just quality control issues, but straight-up scams and dangerous products. For example, in 2018, some customers started getting pink eye due to tainted makeup bought from Wish. Another common issue was receiving completely unrelated products. Peter himself recalls this one instance when a merchant offered a tablet for $70, but what the customers actually received was a small stand with a note saying that the tablet was coming. Another common scam was review baiting. Merchants would sell a great quality product for no profit, get a bunch of reviews, and then nerf the product substantially. Wish was of course trying to address this massive quality control issue. In fact, they were removing 8 million products or 3% of their entire catalog every single week, but that still wasn't enough. These bad actors often had thousands of merchant accounts to work around Wish's quality control algorithms. But while these issues no doubt made Wish look bad, they didn't necessarily kill off their business. Most consumers understood that something like Wish would never be perfect and that you get what you pay for. But while Wish was able to survive the quality control issues, something they couldn't survive was the pandemic. Now, this might be a bit confusing. How could the pandemic have been a bad thing for someone like Wish? Everyone was just sitting at home and indefinitely consuming from tech companies, right? Well, yes, but here's the thing to note. Wish never really had a loyal consumer base. As we previously touched on, Wish's consumers were only loyal to the price, not the retailer. And the only reason that Wish was driving so many sales was due to an extraordinarily large marketing effort worth billions. But what happened during the pandemic? Well, all of a sudden, everyone was willing to spend all of their marketing dollars on digital ads, meaning that ad rates went through the roof. And given that Wish was nothing more than a consumer marketing play, they got crushed. According to Christian Lamone, Wish's former CEO, the easiest way to say what happened is that what worked for it stopped working, and it never evolved. So basically, Wish was a money-burning company with substantial quality control issues and no loyal audience that was held up by massive marketing dollars. When you removed the marketing dollars from the equation, there was simply nothing left. Wish would quickly fall into an endless abyss of losing tens of millions every single quarter. Their massive IPO at the end of 2020 gave them enough money to keep the company afloat, but this didn't last long as Temu would soon enter the scene. If you're not familiar with Temu, they're essentially a Chinese ripoff of Wish that does everything better and for even cheaper. How, you ask? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we have a full video about their insane rise, but the main reason is that Temu is backed by the Chinese e-commerce juggernaut Pinduoduo, which is a top 100 company with infinite cash reserves. So Temu is able to run even bigger marketing campaigns, burn even more money, and have extensive knowledge on how to scale and operate an e-commerce giant. Peter knows this firsthand, and that's why he finally decided to throw in the towel and cash out of Wish for $173 million. Zooming out, it's actually quite ironic. Wish's whole thing was selling products for pennies on the dollar, and in the end, Wish itself is being sold for pennies on the dollar. It's not clear what exactly is in store for the new Wish, but it seems highly unlikely that Wish will ever return to its former glory, and that is the painful demise of Wish.com. If you're interested in deeper dives, interviews with insiders, and exclusive tech analysis, consider subscribing to our free weekly newsletter. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.